The billionaire knew she would fail when he offered the black girl $3 million. His action backfires. "I'll pay you $3 million if you can read these documents and tell me what they mean." The story opens with this cruel declaration from a billionaire to a 7-year-old child. Amora's response is not defiance or tears, but assessment. She had never seen adults measure worth quite so transparently, as if zeros on a check could determine who deserved to understand, who deserved to matter. The introduction immediately establishes the power imbalance. A silver-haired corporate titan facing a small black girl in a red shirt, her grandmother standing protectively beside her. Amora's composure contrasts sharply with the room's expectations. She sets down her worn library book carefully, looks Sterling in the eye, and asks, "May I begin?" The boardroom erupts in uncomfortable laughter, the way executives laughed when entertaining themselves with someone else's dignity. When Sterling gestures dismissively at the stack of documents, legal contracts dense with clauses, financial statements thick with numbers, mathematical proofs designed to confuse specialists, the atmosphere shifts from mockery to anticipation. The documents contain layers of complexity meant to be impossible for anyone unprepared, let alone a child from that neighborhood. But Amara begins to read without hesitation, her photographic memory absorbing each page, her analytical mind connecting patterns across contracts, tracing financial flows, identifying inconsistencies. As she reads, the room transforms from amusement to unease to stunned silence. Sterling's sharp smile begins to crack. When Amara looks up and calmly states, "These documents are connected. They're not a test. They're evidence," she has not just accepted a challenge, she has exposed every assumption in that room about who gets to hold power accountable. Before we dive deep into this jaw-dropping story, quick pause. Drop a comment below and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. I love seeing our global Curious Chronicles family light up the map. If you're already hooked and craving more inspiring and captivating stories that poke curiosity like this one, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications. We drop beautiful, heart-pounding stories every week that you seriously don't want to miss, so let's dive right into it. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor takes 37 seconds. Amara counts them, the way she counts everything: steps on sidewalks, cars at intersections, words in the books she borrows from Meadowbrook Community Center's library. Beside her, grandmother Evelyn stands with the posture she always maintains in spaces like this, the posture she calls armor, spine straight, chin level, hand steady even when the rest of her isn't. The elevator doors open onto wealth that makes people speak in whispers. Floor-to-ceiling windows frame the city like a kingdom claimed, buildings reduced to toys from this height, people invisible entirely. The reception area gleams, marble floors so polished Amara can see her reflection judged in their surface, abstract art that costs more than most homes, furniture designed for appearance rather than comfort. A young woman in a sharp suit barely glances at them before gesturing down a corridor lined with photographs of Jonathan Sterling shaking hands with politicians, cutting ribbons, accepting awards for philanthropy. "Mr. Sterling is expecting you," she says, the kind of professional courtesy that manages to sound like dismissal. The boardroom at the corridor's end stops Amara mid-step. Glass walls on 3 sides reveal the city sprawling below, the morning sun catching on windows and steel. The mahogany conference table stretches long enough to seat 20, its surface reflecting fluorescent light so perfectly it looks like dark water. Executives stand arranged along the walls, men in expensive suits, women in tailored jackets, all with expressions carefully neutral, professionally blank, waiting. At the head of the table sits Jonathan Sterling. Silver hair catches the light like a crown. His suit costs more than 3 months of grandmother Evelyn's salary cleaning offices at night, buildings like this one, emptying trash bins for men who never learn her name. His smile is sharp as broken glass, confident as gravity. He doesn't stand when they enter. That tells Amara everything she needs to know about what he thinks this meeting is. "Mrs. Johnson," he says, not rising. And this must be Amara. Grandmother Evelyn's hand finds Amara's shoulder, a gentle pressure that means pay attention, be careful, remember who you are. "Mr. Sterling," Evelyn says, her voice steady. "Thank you for meeting with us about the Meadowbrook Community Center funding. Ah. Sterling's smile widens, and something cold moves behind his eyes. Yes. About that. He gestures to the chairs opposite him. They sit. Amara clutches her library book against her chest, the same book she's checked out 17 times, its cover worn soft from reading, pages dog-eared at her favorite parts. The executives along the walls shift slightly, a ripple of attention focusing. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Sterling continues, leaning back in Italian leather that probably cost more than Amara's entire school wardrobe. This isn't exactly a funding meeting. It's more of a demonstration. The word hangs in the air like smoke. You see, Sterling says, addressing the room now rather than them, there's considerable debate about whether investing in underprivileged communities actually yields results. Whether certain children truly have the capacity for complex learning, or whether we're simply throwing resources at a problem that biology has already solved. Amara feels grandmother Evelyn's hand tighten on her shoulder. The grip means breathe, it means steady, it means I'm here. Sterling gestures at a stack of documents in the center of the table. Thick folders, legal contracts dense with clauses, financial statements layered with numbers, pages and pages of complexity designed to intimidate. So I've prepared a little test. A demonstration of potential, if you will. He looks directly at Amara for the first time, and his smile sharpens further. I will pay you $3 million, he announces to the room, if this 7-year-old child can read these documents and tell me what they mean. The boardroom erupts in laughter, not cruel exactly, but dismissive, the kind of laughter that comes easy when you're certain of the punchline. Executives exchange knowing glances. Someone near the window shakes his head, smiling. A 7-year-old, a woman murmurs. This should be entertaining. Sterling's smile has settled into something triumphant, something that assumes victory before the game has started. He believes he's being clever, perhaps even kind, offering money for an impossible task, then positioning himself as generous when he doesn't have to pay. Amara sets her book down carefully on the mahogany table. The worn library binding looks small against the expensive wood, insignificant against the stacks of official documents. She meets Sterling's eyes directly. May I begin? She asks. Her voice is quiet but clear, the voice she uses when answering questions in class, when helping younger kids at the community center learn their letters. It's not defiant. It's not afraid. It's the voice of someone who has asked permission her whole life to exist in spaces that question whether she belongs. Sterling's smile widens, reaches his eyes, shows teeth. By all means. Amara reaches for the first document. The laughter hasn't quite died yet. Someone near the door is still chuckling. Executives still wear their knowing smiles. She opens the folder and begins to read. The first page is a legal contract, dense with terminology designed to obscure. Amara's eyes move across the text, her photographic memory absorbing each word, each clause, storing them with perfect clarity. She turns the page. Then another. The room's amusement begins to fade into curiosity, then something else, unease, perhaps, or the first stirrings of doubt. She reaches for the second document. Financial statements, columns of numbers, profit allocations, expense reports. Her mind processes them the way it processes everything, cataloging, connecting, finding patterns where others see only chaos. 3 pages in, Amara looks up. The room has gone completely quiet now. Sterling's smile has frozen on his face, no longer quite reaching his eyes. These documents are connected, Amara says simply. Sterling's smile cracks slightly. What? They're not random. Amara's voice remains calm, analytical, the voice of someone explaining something obvious. This contract references account numbers that appear in this financial statement. These expense reports correspond to clauses in this agreement. They're not separate documents for me to analyze individually. They're pieces of something larger. The room shifts. Executives straighten. Someone's phone buzzes and they ignore it. Sterling's smile has disappeared entirely now, replaced by something careful, something alert. "You're mistaken," he says smoothly. "These are simply examples of complex business documents." "No," Amara says, and her 7-year-old voice cuts through his adult certainty like light through glass. "These documents tell a story. And I don't think it's the story you wanted me to find." She turns another page, and in the silence that follows, his smile doesn't return. Amara spreads the documents across the mahogany table, arranging them with the methodical precision of someone solving a puzzle. Contract here, financial statement there, expense report beside it. Her small hands move with purpose while the room watches in silence that has weight now, silence that presses down like atmospheric pressure before a storm. "This donation agreement," she says, tapping a clause buried in the middle of page 7, states that funds designated for the Meadowbrook Community Center educational programs will be processed through a fiscal sponsor. She pulls another document closer. The fiscal sponsor is listed as Meridian Holdings. Sterling shifts in his chair. The leather creaks. That's standard practice for non-profit. Meridian Holdings receives the donations. Amara continues as if he hasn't spoken, her finger tracing a line of numbers across the financial statement. And according to this clause in Section 4.2, they retain 60% for administrative costs and operational overhead before distributing the remainder. An executive near the window uncrosses his arms. Another straightens slightly, attention sharpening. 60% is high, Amara says, her voice still that same calm, analytical tone, but it's legal if disclosed. Except. She reaches for a third document, a corporate filing thick with legal language. Meridian Holdings is registered as a subsidiary of Sterling Ventures LLC. She looks up at Jonathan Sterling, 7 years old, meeting a man who has spent decades learning to intimidate. "That's your company, Mr. Sterling." The silence changes texture. It's no longer just attention. It's realization spreading through the room like cracks through ice. Sterling leans forward, smile returning but strained now, forced. "Young lady, you're misreading complex adult materials. Corporate structures involve legitimate." "These numbers," Amara interrupts, and there's something in her voice that stops in mid-sentence, something that doesn't ask permission to speak truth, show a pattern. "Over the past 3 years, donations meant for children's programs, reading initiatives, tutoring services, technology access, were routed through Meridian Holdings. 60% never reached the community center. That's $847,000 that should have bought books and computers and teacher salaries." She pulls out another page, this one filled with expense reports. Instead, this shows Meridian Holdings expenses including luxury vehicle leases, private travel, and something listed as executive compensation packages. The same month our community center cut its after-school program because of insufficient funding. An executive near the door whispers something to the man beside him. Both are no longer smiling. One has gone pale. Sterling stands abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is absurd. You're taking isolated documents out of context. Numbers don't misread, Mr. Sterling." Amara's voice remains steady, a child's clarity cutting through an adult's carefully constructed justifications. "And these numbers show theft. Systematic, deliberate theft from programs designed to help children like me." The room erupts. Executives talking over each other, someone pulling out their phone, another moving towards Sterling with questions forming on their lips. Sterling raises his voice, commanding attention he's used to receiving without effort. "This meeting is over. Security." But Grandmother Evelyn has already moved. While everyone watched Amara deconstruct documents, while attention focused on the small girl making impossible connections, Evelyn's phone has been recording, propped against her purse at the edge of the table, camera aimed at Amara, at Sterling, at the documents spread across mahogany like evidence at a crime scene. Her thumb moves across the screen. Upload. Share. Send. By the time Sterling notices, by the time lawyers start shouting about unauthorized recording and demanding phones, it's already done. The video is uploading to 3 different platforms, backed up to cloud storage, shared with contacts Evelyn has cultivated carefully over years of watching powerful men assume cleaning ladies don't understand technology. Security arrives, two men in dark suits who look uncomfortable, who weren't trained for this particular scenario. They're here to escort people out, maybe confiscate a phone, not to contain a 7-year-old who has just exposed corporate fraud in real time. "Mrs. Johnson, we need your phone," one says, apologetic but firm. Evelyn hands it over without protest. The video is at 63% uploaded. By the time they unlock her phone, find the app, attempt to stop the transfer, it will be complete. They gather their belongings, Amara's worn library book, Evelyn's purse, their dignity intact despite the chaos erupting around them. As they walk toward the elevator, executives part like water, some staring, others deliberately looking away. Someone's phone buzzes. Then another. Then 5 at once, a symphony of incoming notifications. Did she really just, someone whispers, expose him in his own boardroom? Those documents, how could a child? The elevator doors close on the 42nd floor's controlled panic. In the mirrored walls, Amara can see her reflection, red shirt bright as warning, book clutched again to her chest, grandmother Evelyn's hand firm on her shoulder. Neither of them speaks during the 37-second descent. The lobby is unchanged, same marble floors, same expensive art, same receptionist who still doesn't really see them. They walk out into morning sunlight and city noise, the building behind them continuing its day as if the world hasn't just shifted. Evelyn's backup phone buzzes in her pocket. Then again. Then continuously, a stream of notifications that doesn't stop. She pulls it out, opens the app, and shows Amara the screen. The video has been viewed 3,000 times. Then 5,000. Then 10,000. The numbers climbing faster than Amara can count them. Faster than anything she's ever seen spread. Comments flooding in, shares multiplying, the algorithm recognizing something viral and pushing it further, wider, to feeds across the city, across the country, across the world. Child genius exposes billionaire fraud in real time. 7-year-old reads documents, discovers embezzlement. This girl just destroyed a corporate empire in 10 minutes. Grandmother Evelyn's hand tightens on Amara's shoulder, not warning now, but steadying. Because they both understand what comes next. The powerful don't crumble quietly. They don't accept exposure with grace. They fight back with every tool at their disposal, lawyers and money and influence and machinery designed specifically to silence people who speak truths that threaten comfortable lies. The video view counter continues climbing. Somewhere above them, on the 42nd floor, Jonathan Sterling watches the same numbers rise, watches his carefully constructed empire begin to crack, and realizes that the child he dismissed as entertainment has just become the most dangerous person he's ever underestimated. Amara looks up at her grandmother. What happens now? Evelyn meets her eyes, sees the wisdom there that's too old for 7, the understanding that truth comes with cost. Now, she says quietly, we hold on tight and refuse to let go. The video reaches 1 million views by midnight. By morning, it has fractured into 1,000 different stories, each one reshaping what happened in that boardroom into something that fits the narrative people need it to be. Child prodigy stuns billionaire with genius-level analysis reads the morning show headline, complete with graphics of Amara's school photo and animated sparkles. The segment runs 4 minutes, spends 3 of them marveling at her photographic memory, and mentions the actual fraud for exactly 18 seconds before cutting to commercial. Family accused of elaborate hoax to extort wealthy philanthropist trends on social media by noon, accompanied by grainy photos of their apartment building, speculation about who really analyzed those documents, suggestions that Evelyn has been planning this for months. Amara watches both versions from their small living room, sitting on the couch that grandmother Evelyn bought secondhand 7 years ago, the fabric worn soft in the places they sit most often. Neither story sounds like what actually happened. One makes her a superhero. The other makes her a puppet. Both erase the simple fact that she read documents and found theft. The phone rings constantly. News producers wanting interviews. Talk shows offering appearances. Documentary filmmakers pitching stories about genius children from underprivileged backgrounds. Grandmother Evelyn declines them all with the same polite firmness. My granddaughter is 7. She's not available for entertainment. But some calls are different. The legal letter arrives via certified mail on the 3rd day, delivered by a courier who makes Evelyn sign 3 times. The envelope is heavy, expensive paper embossed with the logo of Morrison & Hecht, the kind of law firm that has entire floors in buildings like Sterling Enterprises. Inside, 12 pages of dense legal language boil down to a simple message. Cease and desist, retract your statements, acknowledge that the documents were misunderstood, or face litigation for defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The proposed settlement is attached. Evelyn reads it twice, her jaw tightening. They're offering $100,000 to sign an NDA, release Sterling from all liability, and publicly state that Amara misinterpreted complex financial instruments beyond her comprehension. She sets the letter down carefully, the way you handle something toxic. At work that night, Evelyn's supervisor pulls her aside in the employee break room. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead, the same lights she's cleaned beneath for 11 years, in buildings owned by men who have never learned her name. Evelyn, her supervisor says, and his tone is apologetic in the way that precedes bad news. I'm sorry, but Mr. Sterling's people called. Corporate is concerned about the publicity. They're suggesting that maybe you'd be more comfortable finding other employment. He won't meet her eyes. He's a good man, as far as good men go in systems that protect power over people. But good men still enforce bad rules when their own jobs depend on it. They're suggesting, Evelyn repeats slowly, or they're requiring. They're being very insistent about the suggesting. She nods once, understanding the language of plausible deniability, the way pressure applies itself through careful words that leave no paper trail. She's been cleaning offices long enough to know how these things work. No formal termination, no documentation, just increasing discomfort until resignation seems like the better option. At Amara's school, the principal requests a meeting. Mrs. Henderson has been principal for 16 years, has always been kind to Amara, has praised her reading level and encouraged her curiosity. But today her smile is strained, professional in a way that maintains distance. We're concerned, she says, hands folded on her desk, about the disruption this media attention is causing. Some parents have expressed worry about their children being exposed to this level of controversy. We're wondering if Amara might be more comfortable in a different learning environment. Grandmother Evelyn sits very straight, posture like armor. You're suggesting my granddaughter transfer because she exposed fraud. We're suggesting, Mrs. Henderson says carefully, that the current situation isn't conducive to a positive educational experience for anyone involved. The language is always careful, always suggesting, never demanding, always concerned about disruption, never about justice. The machinery of institutions grinding forward with the momentum of protecting normalcy over truth. Social media continues fracturing. Supporters create hashtags, #JusticeForAmara, #BelieveChildren, #SterlingFraud. Critics create counter-narratives, #CoachChild, #Media Manipulation, #FakeGenius. Both sides perform their certainty with equal conviction, reducing a 7-year-old who found evidence of theft into a symbol for whatever cause needs a mascot. Sterling himself appears on a primetime news program 5 days after the video goes viral. He's wearing a different expensive suit, silver hair perfectly styled, expression calibrated for maximum sympathy. The interviewer lobs gentle questions, the kind that assume his innocence and work backward from there. There's been considerable controversy, the interviewer says, regarding allegations made by a young girl. What's your response? Sterling's smile is sad, understanding, the smile of a man being unfairly maligned. I admire her enthusiasm, truly. She's clearly a bright child. But she simply misunderstood extremely complex financial instruments. Corporate structures involve legitimate subsidiaries, proper fiscal sponsorship, standard administrative overhead. To a child, even a gifted child, these can appear suspicious when they're actually completely legal. He pauses, lets the moment breathe. I'm more concerned about how this child is being used. Her grandmother, with all due respect, may have her own motivations. And there are activist groups that prey on situations like this, coaching vulnerable families to make accusations that generate publicity. The interviewer nods sympathetically. So you believe the child was coached? I believe, Sterling says carefully, that a 7-year-old reading documents she couldn't possibly fully comprehend has been given interpretations by adults with agendas. And that's tragic, really. A child being weaponized for political purposes. The interview runs for 12 minutes. It's professional, polished, and completely absent the moment when Amara calmly connected shell companies to embezzlement, when she traced $847,000 in stolen funds, when his smile cracked in real time. The video of that moment has 15 million views now. But the news cycle moves fast, and mainstream media prefers stories that fit existing templates. Child prodigy yes, corporate fraud investigation maybe, actual accountability unlikely. On the 7th day, grandmother Evelyn's phone rings with a number she doesn't recognize. She almost doesn't answer. She's learned to let unknown calls go to voicemail, has deleted hundreds of messages from reporters and producers and lawyers. But something makes her pick up. Mrs. Johnson. The voice is older, female, crisp with authority that doesn't need to announce itself. My name is Patricia Chen. I'm a retired investigative journalist, and I've been watching Jonathan Sterling for years. Evelyn sits down slowly. Why are you calling? Because your granddaughter did in 10 minutes what I've been trying to do for a decade. She found proof. There's something like admiration in the voice, and something else, anger, maybe, or vindication. I've been tracking Sterling's foundation practices since 2015. I've suspected fraud, but he's careful. Lawyers review everything. Paper trails go cold. Whistleblowers get paid off or threatened into silence. Then how can you help us? Because he made a mistake. He got arrogant. He didn't think a 7-year-old child could possibly understand what she was reading, so he put real evidence in front of her. Evidence I can corroborate, verify, expand. Patricia Chen's voice sharpens. I've been waiting for someone brave enough to go on record. I didn't expect her to be 7. But brave is brave, regardless of age. Outside their apartment window, the city continues its evening routine. Traffic, sirens, life proceeding as if nothing fundamental has shifted. But something has. The machinery designed to protect power has begun moving, applying pressure, attempting to crush or discredit or exhaust anyone who threatens its operation. And somewhere in that machinery, a crack has appeared. Small. 7 years old. Refusing to unsee what she's seen. Tell me what you need, Evelyn says. They arrive at 9 in the morning on a Saturday. 3 lawyers in suits that cost more than a month's rent. The knock is professional, authoritative, the kind of knock that expects doors to open. Grandmother Evelyn checks the peephole, sees expensive briefcases and expressionless faces, and knows exactly what this visit means. She opens the door but doesn't invite them in. Mrs. Johnson, the lead attorney says, a woman with silver-streaked hair and a smile that never reaches her eyes. I'm Caroline Voss from Morrison and Hecht. We represent Mr. Sterling. May we have a moment of your time? You can have it right here, Evelyn says, one hand on the doorframe, the other resting on Amara's shoulder. Her granddaughter stands beside her in pajamas and braids, clutching the library book she's been rereading since everything started. Caroline Voss's smile tightens. Perhaps it would be better to discuss this privately. My granddaughter and I don't keep secrets. Say what you came to say. The lawyers exchange glances, a language Evelyn recognizes, the wordless communication of people who used to getting their way and encountering resistance. One of them, a younger man with perfectly styled hair, opens his briefcase and withdraws a folder. We'd like to present a settlement offer, Caroline Voss says, her tone shifting to something that sounds reasonable, almost kind. Mr. Sterling understands this situation has been difficult for your family. The media attention, the disruption to normal life. He'd like to resolve this matter in a way that benefits everyone. She nods to the younger lawyer, who hands Evelyn the folder. Inside, clipped neatly to a contract, is a cashier's check. $500,000. The numbers blur slightly as Evelyn stares at them. More money than she's made in 15 years of night shifts. More money than she's ever held, enough to change everything about their life. New apartment. College fund. Security. The terms are straightforward. Caroline Voss continues. You and Amara sign a non-disclosure agreement. No further public statements about Mr. Sterling or Sterling Enterprises. No interviews, no social media posts, no cooperation with journalists or investigators. In return, you receive the settlement and Mr. Sterling releases any potential legal claims. Legal claims for what? Evelyn asks quietly. Defamation. Tortious interference with business relationships. Conspiracy to defraud. The lawyer's tone remains professionally neutral, as if she's listing menu items rather than threats. The agreement also includes a joint public statement that Amara, despite her obvious intelligence, misunderstood complex financial documents beyond the comprehension of a child her age. The folder feels heavy in Evelyn's hands, weighted with all the ways this money could matter. But she's been poor long enough to know that some prices aren't measured in dollars. My granddaughter's integrity, Evelyn says slowly, clearly isn't for sale. Caroline Voss's smile disappears entirely. Mrs. Johnson, I don't think you understand the situation you're in. Mr. Sterling has considerable resources, significant influence, and connections throughout this city. He can make your life very difficult. Or he can make it very easy. This offer is generous. Extraordinarily generous, given the circumstances. I'd suggest you consider it carefully. I have considered it, Evelyn says. The answer is no. Leave. Now. The third lawyer, who hasn't spoken yet, leans forward slightly. His voice is softer than the others, which somehow makes it worse. Think about your granddaughter. Think about what continued attention will do to her. The pressure. The scrutiny. Children her age should be playing, not caught up in legal battles they can't possibly understand. I understand, Amara says. All three lawyers turn toward her, as if surprised she can speak. She's been so quiet they may have forgotten she was there, or assumed she wasn't paying attention, or believed that children don't comprehend adult threats even when those threats are designed specifically to silence them. I understand what you're doing, Amara continues, her voice that same calm analytical tone she used in the boardroom. You're offering money to make me say I was wrong. To say I didn't see what I saw, didn't read what I read. You're offering $500,000 for me to lie. Caroline Voss opens her mouth, but Amara isn't finished. If the truth is worth $500,000 to hide, she asks, looking directly at the lead attorney, what's it worth to tell? The lawyers have no answer for that. They stand in the doorway of a modest apartment in a neighborhood they probably drive past without seeing, facing a 7-year-old child in Saturday morning pajamas, and for a moment the machinery of their profession, the contracts and clauses and carefully constructed leverage, finds no purchase against simple moral clarity. Caroline Voss recovers first. She takes back the folder with the check, places it in her briefcase with deliberate care. You're making a mistake, Mrs. Johnson. Mr. Sterling's patience has limits. So does mine, Evelyn says, and closes the door. The phone rings that evening while Amara helps with dinner, cutting vegetables at the kitchen counter with careful precision. Grandmother Evelyn answers, listens, and her expression shifts, surprise, then something like cautious hope. This is Patricia Chen, the voice says without preamble. Federal investigators contacted me 2 hours ago. They want to see the documents. They're opening an investigation. Evelyn sits down slowly, knife forgotten on the cutting board. They believe it. They have grounds to pursue it. My reporting gave them context, but your granddaughter's video gave them probable cause. They're requesting the original documents Sterling used in that boardroom. Can you get them? I don't have them. Sterling's lawyers already destroyed them, most likely. But copies exist somewhere. Financial filings. Corporate records. We just need to find the trail Amara identified. Patricia Chen pauses. This won't be easy. Sterling will fight. He'll accelerate his campaign against you. It's going to get worse before it gets better. It's already worse, Evelyn says quietly. At school on Monday, Amara learns exactly how much worse. She's walking to her classroom when Tyler Morrison blocks her path, tall for third grade. His father works in Sterling's legal department. 3 other children stand behind him, a small chorus of inherited certainty. My dad says you're a liar, Tyler announces, loud enough for the hallway to hear. He says you made it all up for attention. Other students stop, watching. This is how power replicates itself. Children learning from parents that some people can be dismissed, that accusations against the wealthy must be false, that a girl like Amara doesn't deserve belief. Amara adjusts her backpack, the library book tucked safely inside. She doesn't cry. She doesn't argue. She simply looks at Tyler with the same assessment she turned on Sterling in his glass-walled boardroom. I didn't make up the documents, she says calmly. I just read what was there. The numbers showed theft. Numbers don't have opinions. They just show facts. You don't know anything, Tyler insists, but there's uncertainty in his voice now, the wobble of someone repeating lines without understanding them. I know how to read, Amara says. And I know the difference between what's true and what people want to be true. She walks past him, into her classroom, and sits at her desk. Around her, whispers spread like wildfire, some sympathetic, some skeptical, all of them turning her into something she's not. Symbol or villain. Genius or fraud. Never just a child who found evidence and refused to pretend she didn't see it. That night, after Amara is asleep, Grandmother Evelyn kneels beside her bed the way she has every night for 7 years. Her knees ache from the linoleum floor, from years of cleaning on hands and knees, from the physical cost of survival. She closes her eyes and prays not for victory or vindication, but for something simpler and harder, strength to protect her granddaughter through whatever comes next. Outside their window, the city gleams with lights from buildings where decisions are made, where power consolidates, where men like Sterling calculate how much pressure to apply before people break. But Evelyn has been carrying weight her whole life. And she's learned that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to put it down. The school auditorium hasn't been this full since the winter concert 3 years ago when the entire 5th grade performed Let It Snow with handbells. Tonight there are no handbells. No holiday decorations. Just rows of folding chairs packed with parents who have opinions about whether a 7-year-old should be allowed to continue attending school after exposing a billionaire's fraud on national television. Grandmother Evelyn and Amara arrive 15 minutes early, but the front rows are already claimed. They find seats near the back, surrounded by whispers that don't bother to lower themselves. Amara wears her red shirt, the same one from the boardroom, freshly washed and ironed. Her library book sits in her lap like a talisman. Around them, the room divides itself with the precision of political allegiance. Supporters on the left, opponents on the right, the uncertain scattered throughout like debris. The school board sits at a long table on the stage, 5 members in business casual attire, expressions carefully neutral in the way of people who have been briefed by lawyers about liability and optics. Principal Henderson sits at the end, her kindness from 16 years compressed into professional distance. The superintendent, Dr. Marcus Webb, adjusts his microphone with the weary air of someone who did not sign up for this particular crisis. We're here tonight, Dr. Webb begins, reading from prepared remarks, to address concerns raised by several families regarding recent events involving one of our students. This is not a disciplinary hearing. Rather, it's an opportunity for community input on how best to maintain a positive learning environment for all children. The language is careful. Disruption without naming what's being disrupted. Events without acknowledging what those events were. Maintain environment as if the current situation is temporary, whether rather than the climate changing. A parent stands immediately when public comment opens, Margaret Whitfield, whose husband works in Sterling's communications department. She's wearing pearls and certainty. Our children shouldn't be exposed to this kind of controversy, she says, voice carrying across the auditorium. They come to school to learn math and reading, not to be caught up in adult legal battles and media circuses. My daughter has nightmares now. She's afraid reporters will show up at recess. This isn't fair to the other children. Applause from the right side of the room. Murmurs of agreement. Someone calls out exactly with the confidence of consensus. Another parent stands, Amara Johnson, no relation to Amara despite the shared surname, who has 2 children in the district and works construction. With respect to Mrs. Whitfield, maybe our children should know that telling the truth matters more than being comfortable. Maybe they should see that doing what's right can be difficult. Seems like that's a better lesson than teaching them to look away when powerful people do wrong. Applause from the left. The room's division deepens, a fault line running through the middle of the auditorium. More parents speak. A woman in expensive activewear expresses concern about politicizing education and wonders if the situation has been manufactured for publicity. A man in a postal worker's uniform says his daughter looks up to Amara and has started reading more, asking questions about justice. A lawyer articulates worry about the district's liability exposure. A teacher defends the importance of critical thinking. Through it all, Amara sits very still, listening to adults debate whether her existence in their children's school constitutes disruption. Whether truth-telling is educational or traumatic. Whether a child who found evidence of theft should be protected or removed. Sterling's influence is everywhere, in the carefully worded concerns, in the focus on disruption rather than fraud, in the way questions circle around whether Amara should be allowed to stay without ever acknowledging that what she exposed was real. Money has gravity. It bends conversation around itself, changes the terrain of acceptable discourse. Dr. Webb finally raises his hand for silence. We'd like to hear from Amara herself, if she's willing to speak. The auditorium goes quiet, not the silence of respect, but the silence of curiosity mixed with skepticism. What could a 7-year-old possibly say that matters in a room full of adults? Grandmother Evelyn's hand finds Amara's shoulder, that familiar pressure that means you don't have to, but I'm here if you do. Amara stands. Her legs feel uncertain, but she walks down the center aisle, past rows of adults who have already decided what they think of her. The microphone on the floor is adjusted down to her height. She has to stand on tiptoes slightly, her feet barely maintaining contact with the ground. She looks out at the auditorium, packed with people she doesn't know, making decisions about her life, reducing her to a problem requiring management. Her voice, when she speaks, is quiet but clear. The microphone catches every word. I didn't choose to find fraud, Amara says. I was asked to read documents. I read them. They showed that money meant for children's programs was being stolen. I chose to tell the truth about it. She pauses, looking at the parents on the right side of the room, the ones who want her gone to restore comfort. If that makes people uncomfortable, maybe they should examine why they're comfortable with lies. The auditorium erupts. Half the room surges to its feet in applause, not polite meeting applause, but the kind that comes from recognition, from seeing something articulated that needed saying. The other half erupts in anger, shouting, objections, demands that this is exactly the kind of inappropriate political statement that proves the disruption. The school board calls for order. Dr. Webb pounds his gavel. Principal Henderson stands, hands raised for calm. But the moment has escaped containment. Someone in the back is recording on their phone. Someone else is already typing on Twitter. The careful management of this meeting has dissolved into the reality of what it is. Adults fighting about whether a child should be punished for refusing to be complicit in theft. The board tables the decision, will reconvene, will consider all perspectives, will consult with legal counsel. Translation: they don't know what to do when institutional pressure meets moral clarity, so they're buying time to see which force proves stronger. Amara returns to her seat beside grandmother Evelyn. Around them, the meeting continues. More comments, more procedure, more careful language that circles around truth without landing on it. But Amara isn't listening anymore. She opens her library book to the page she marked and continues reading while adults debate her fate. By the time they reach home, the video has been shared 50,000 times. By midnight, 500,000. Morning brings 2 million views and counting. Her statement about being comfortable with lies clipped into 15-second sound bites that spread across platforms like wildfire jumping fire breaks. In his corner office on the 42nd floor of Sterling Enterprises, Jonathan Sterling watches the video loop on his computer screen. Each replay shows the same thing: a small girl at a microphone, feet barely touching the ground, saying something that cannot be unsaid. His jaw tightens. The carefully constructed narrative, coached child, misunderstood documents, exploited family, has collapsed into something simpler and more dangerous: a 7-year-old asking adults why they're comfortable with theft. His phone rings. The head of his legal team. The federal investigators are accelerating their timeline. They're requesting documents by end of week. Patterson in accounting wants immunity to cooperate. Sterling hangs up without responding. On his screen, the video plays again. Amara's voice, quiet and clear. Maybe they should examine why they're comfortable with lies. He's built an empire on the assumption that money could buy silence, that influence could reshape narrative, that a child could be dismissed as easily as any other inconvenient truth. But control is an illusion. It only works until someone refuses to participate in the performance. Patricia Chen's article publishes the next morning in the outlet that fired her 3 years ago for being too aggressive in her corporate investigations. They've brought her back for this story, recognizing its weight. The headline reads, "When Children Show Adults How to Have Integrity, the Amara Johnson Story." It's not a feel-good piece. It's a documented investigation of Sterling's financial practices, corroborated through public records, whistleblower testimony, and independent analysis. It confirms everything Amara identified in that boardroom. The article concludes with her school board statement, contextualized not as precocious wisdom but as moral clarity that adults have unlearned. The story trends for 3 days. Federal investigators issue subpoenas. Other nonprofits quietly begin auditing their funding sources. Whistleblowers start coming forward. And in a small apartment where the rent is due in 2 weeks, Amara Johnson finishes her library book, returns it the next day, and checks out another. Because regardless of what adults decide about her, she still has reading to do. Patricia Chen's full investigation publishes on a Tuesday morning, 47 pages of documented fraud that reads like a blueprint of how wealth protects itself. Shell companies nested within subsidiaries. Routing structures designed to obscure rather than clarify. A decade of systematic theft dressed in the language of charitable administration. By Wednesday, 3 other nonprofits have contacted her with similar patterns. By Thursday, the number is 7. Sterling's method replicates across organizations. Offer generous donations with complex fiscal sponsorship requirements, route funds through entities he controls, extract administrative fees that somehow always total just below the threshold that triggers regulatory review. Legal enough to survive casual audit. Fraudulent enough to steal millions. Friday morning brings federal agents. They arrive at Sterling Enterprises at dawn, a coordinated action involving 20 agents in Navy windbreakers marked FBI in yellow letters. The reception area with its expensive art and marble floors becomes a staging ground for evidence collection. Boxes of documents, hard drives, servers disconnected and labeled. Executives arriving for work are turned away. Employees inside are separated, interviewed individually, offered the clarity that cooperation brings lighter consequences than loyalty. James Patterson, Sterling's chief financial officer for 8 years, accepts immunity within 3 hours. He sits in a conference room he's used for hundreds of meetings and explains exactly how the routing worked, which documents were falsified, where the money actually went. His voice is tired, defeated, carrying the weight of someone who convinced himself that following orders absolved personal responsibility. "I knew it was wrong," he tells the investigators, but Sterling made it seem inevitable. Like this was just how business worked at this level. And the alternative was losing my job, my career, everything. By noon, 2 more associates have flipped. By evening, 5. The carefully constructed empire begins dismantling itself from the inside, each person scrambling to secure their own survival now that the structure protecting them has cracked. Sterling calls a press conference for Saturday afternoon. He's wearing his most sympathetic suit, dark blue instead of his usual sharp grey, suggesting seriousness and vulnerability. His hair is slightly less perfect than usual, humanizing. The lectern displays the Sterling Foundation logo, reminding everyone of charitable work. Behind him, a banner reads "Building Futures Together." The performance is calculated down to his tone. "I stand before you today," Sterling begins, voice carefully modulated to suggest strength under pressure, "facing a coordinated attack on my life's work. For 25 years, the Sterling Foundation has invested in communities, supported educational initiatives, and helped children who deserve opportunity." He pauses, lets the moment breathe, allows cameras to capture what appears to be genuine emotion. "Now, a child has been manipulated, and I use that word deliberately, manipulated by adults with political agendas to make accusations that fundamentally mischaracterize standard business practices. Yes, we use fiscal sponsors. Yes, we maintain administrative overhead. These are normal, legal, necessary aspects of non-profit work." His voice begins to break, a tremor that could be read as pain. "What breaks my heart is seeing a 7-year-old weaponized this way. Her intelligence exploited, her innocence corrupted, her trust betrayed by people who should protect children, not use them as ammunition in corporate warfare." The press conference runs 20 minutes. He takes no questions. By the time it ends, public opinion has already begun shifting beneath him like unstable ground. Patricia Chen's investigation is too thorough. The federal raid too public. His associates cooperating too quickly. The evidence too overwhelming. The press conference was meant to control narrative. Instead, it becomes exhibit of desperation. 3 days later, the Justice Department announces a formal hearing. Televised. Public record. Multiple witnesses, including the child whose video started everything. Jonathan Sterling will answer questions about Sterling Enterprises' charitable practices under oath. So will Amara Johnson. The lawyers arrive at Amara and Evelyn's apartment that evening. Not Sterling's lawyers this time, but federal prosecutors preparing their key witness. They're professional but kind, aware they're asking something extraordinary from someone who should be worried about homework and playground politics, not federal testimony. Patricia Chen comes with them. She sits beside Amara at their small kitchen table, legal pads and printed documents spread between them like a map of what's coming. "They're going to try to confuse you," Patricia explains, her voice gentle but honest. "Sterling's attorneys will use technical language, rapid-fire questions, anything to make you seem uncertain or coached. Their entire strategy depends on making you appear less credible than their client." Amara nods, listening with the same focused attention she brings to reading. "But here's what you need to remember," Patricia continues. "You don't need to match their complexity. You just need to tell them what you saw. The documents showed theft. The numbers didn't add up. Money that should have reached children didn't. That's the truth. Everything else is just noise designed to hide it." They practice for 2 hours. Sample questions, hostile cross-examination, attempts to discredit through condescension. Amara answers each one with the same calm precision, neither defensive nor aggressive, just factual. Numbers don't lie. Documents show patterns. Theft is theft regardless of how it's structured. After the prosecutors and Patricia leave, grandmother Evelyn sits with Amara in the small living room where they've spent 7 years building a life from determination and careful budgeting. The television is off. The city noise filters through windows that don't quite seal properly. Outside, the world continues not knowing that in 3 weeks, a federal hearing will determine whether a child's testimony can hold power accountable. "You don't have to do this," Evelyn says quietly. "You're 7 years old. This shouldn't be your responsibility. We could disappear. Move somewhere else. Start over. Let someone else fight this battle." Amara looks at her grandmother, sees the exhaustion there, the fear that's been growing since that first video went viral. Sees the protective instinct that wants to shield her from what's coming, the scrutiny, the pressure, the weight of adult consequences falling on child shoulders. Those documents, Amara says, her voice that same steady clarity that's defined everything since the boardroom, showed them stealing from kids like me. From the community center where you took me to learn reading. From programs that help children whose families can't afford books or tutors or the things that make learning possible. She picks up her current library book, runs her fingers along its worn spine. If I don't finish what I started, they'll say I was wrong, or lying, or confused. And then nothing changes. They'll just be more careful next time. Hide it better. Steal from different kids in different ways. But you're 7, Evelyn whispers, and her voice breaks slightly. You should be playing. Being a child. Not carrying this. I know, Amara says. But it is now. My responsibility. Because I'm the one who saw. And once you see something wrong, you can't just pretend you didn't. She opens her book, returns to reading, and the conversation ends not because the fear has vanished, but because sometimes courage isn't the absence of fear. Sometimes it's just refusing to let fear change what you know is right. In his office on the 42nd floor, Jonathan Sterling prepares for his own testimony, surrounded by lawyers coaching him through every potential question, every trap, every way to maintain plausible deniability. They're the best legal team money can buy. But across the city, in an apartment where the rent is due in 2 weeks, a 7-year-old girl practices telling the truth. And she doesn't need coaching for that. The federal hearing room occupies the 3rd floor of the courthouse downtown, a space designed in an era when architecture was meant to convey the weight of justice. High ceilings stretch upward into shadows. Dark wood paneling absorbs light rather than reflecting it. The bench where officials sit rises above everyone else, literally elevated, forcing witnesses to look up when answering questions. Cameras positioned at strategic angles broadcast everything to screens across the country. Amara sits in the witness chair wearing her red shirt, freshly ironed again by grandmother Evelyn, bright as a warning flag against the room's deliberate severity. The chair is built for adults. Her feet dangle several inches above the floor, swinging slightly when she forgets to keep them still. A glass of water sits on the table beside her, untouched. Her hands rest in her lap, fingers interlaced, the same careful composure she maintained in Sterling's boardroom. The gallery is packed. Journalists with notebooks. Sterling's associates in expensive suits. Community members from Meadowbrook who pooled money for bus fare. Patricia Chen in the front row. Grandmother Evelyn directly behind the prosecutor's table, posture like armor, praying silently that her granddaughter's clarity will be enough. Jonathan Sterling sits at the defense table, flanked by 4 attorneys. He's wearing his most authoritative suit, silver hair perfectly styled, expression carefully calibrated to suggest a man enduring false accusations with dignity. But his jaw is tight. His fingers tap an irregular rhythm against the mahogany armrest. The lead prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Morrison, conducts the initial questioning, establishing who Amara is, what happened in the boardroom, what she found in the documents. Amara answers each question clearly, without embellishment, sticking to facts the way Patricia taught her. Yes, she has photographic memory. Yes, she analyzed the documents. Yes, she found evidence of fund diversion. Then Sterling's lead attorney stands for cross-examination. Richard Caldwell has been practicing law for 32 years, has defended corporations through countless investigations, has perfected the art of making witnesses doubt their own certainty. He approaches the witness stand with a smile that's meant to seem friendly but reads as patronizing. Now, sweetheart, he begins, his tone suggesting he's speaking to someone who needs things simplified. These are very complicated matters we're discussing today. My name is Amara, she interrupts, her voice quiet but firm. And they're only complicated if you're trying to hide something. The gallery shifts. Someone suppresses a sound that might be laughter. Caldwell's smile tightens, loses its false warmth. Of course, Amara. Let me ask you, can you explain the difference between gross and net asset value? It's a trap question, designed to expose gaps in her knowledge, to make her seem like a child parroting terms she doesn't understand. Amara considers it for a moment. Gross asset value is the total value of all assets before subtracting liabilities or expenses. Net asset value is what remains after those deductions. She pauses, then adds, but that's not what matters here. What matters is this number. She points to a document displayed on the screen, should match this number. And it doesn't. The difference went to shell companies controlled by Mr. Sterling. Caldwell tries again, launching into rapid-fire technical questions about fiscal sponsorship structures, administrative overhead calculations, standard non-profit accounting practices. He's attempting to overwhelm her with complexity, to create confusion where there was clarity. But Amara doesn't get flustered. She answers what she can answer, admits what she doesn't know, and consistently brings the conversation back to the central point. Money meant for children's programs was diverted to companies Sterling owned. The complexity is intentional obfuscation, not legitimate explanation. Isn't it possible, Caldwell suggests, his tone growing more dismissive, that you were coached by adults to interpret these documents a certain way? That you've been given talking points to? I wasn't coached to see, Amara says, and something in her voice stops him mid-sentence. I was taught to read. My grandmother took me to the Meadowbrook Community Center Library when I was 4. Mrs. Patterson, the librarian, taught me how letters make words and words make meaning. Reading showed me what was in those documents. Reading showed me theft. She looks directly at Caldwell, 7 years old, meeting 3 decades of legal experience with unflinching clarity. Would you like me to show you again? The room goes absolutely silent. Not the silence of waiting, but the silence of recognition, everyone understanding simultaneously that complexity has been weaponized to obscure something simple. An adult attorney has just been outmaneuvered by a child who refuses to accept that theft becomes legitimate when structured with sufficient sophistication. Caldwell objects, claims the witness is being argumentative. The judge overrules. Let her finish. Sterling shifts in his chair, the first crack in his carefully maintained composure. On the monitors broadcasting his face to the gallery, to the nation, the facade begins crumbling in real time. Caldwell tries a different approach, suggesting Amara's interpretation is colored by inexperience, that years of non-profit work have nuances a child couldn't grasp. Amara listens patiently, then responds with something that will be quoted in every news article for the next week. Numbers don't lie, she says quietly. They show you who people choose to be when they think no one's watching. The federal prosecutor doesn't even need to redirect. The defense has accidentally made the case clearer. Caldwell sits down, jaw tight, aware he's just been dismantled by someone who should have been easy to discredit. Jennifer Morrison stands. Amara, in your own words, why did you speak up about what you found? For the first time, Amara's composure wavers slightly. Not from pressure, but from the weight of answering honestly. I just want kids to get what was promised to them. The community center was supposed to receive funding for books, computers, tutors. Instead, that money went to Mr. Sterling's companies. Kids like me lost programs that could have helped them. That's not complicated. That's wrong. The hearing continues for 3 more hours. Expert witnesses, financial analysts, former Sterling associates testifying about systematic fraud. But the moment everyone remembers, the clip that plays on evening news across the country, is a 7-year-old girl in a red shirt explaining that numbers show who people choose to be when they think no one's watching. In the gallery, Grandmother Evelyn closes her eyes and exhales a breath she's been holding since they entered the courthouse. Patricia Chen types notes that will become tomorrow's article. Community members from Meadowbrook sit straighter, proud and heartbroken simultaneously, proud of this child's courage, heartbroken that she had to carry this burden. And at the defense table, Jonathan Sterling stares at his own hands, the carefully constructed justifications he's maintained for years collapsing under the moral clarity of someone too young to accept that complexity excuses theft. The hearing adjourns. Amara climbs down from the witness chair, her feet finally touching solid ground. She walks past cameras and journalists and adults whose opinions about her have been formed and reformed a dozen times. She reaches her grandmother, and Evelyn wraps her in an embrace that says everything words can't: pride and protection and the fierce love of someone who would have carried this burden herself if she could have. Outside the courthouse, reporters shout questions. Amara doesn't answer them. She just holds her grandmother's hand and walks toward the bus stop, ready to go home. Ready to be 7 again, at least for an evening, before the world decides what comes next. The federal charges come down on a Thursday morning, announced at a press conference where Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Morrison reads from prepared remarks with the measured gravity of someone who understands the weight of what she's saying. Wire fraud, embezzlement, racketeering, money laundering through charitable organizations. The list continues for 3 minutes, each charge another nail in the structure Jonathan Sterling spent 25 years building. The evidence demonstrates a pattern of systematic theft, Morrison states, cameras capturing every word, spanning more than a decade and involving multiple non-profit organizations. Funds designated for vulnerable communities were diverted through complex corporate structures to enrich individuals who held positions of trust. She doesn't mention Amara by name. She doesn't need to. Everyone watching knows where this investigation started, with a 7-year-old in a red shirt reading documents in a boardroom designed to intimidate her into silence. The Sterling Enterprises board meets in emergency session that same afternoon. The vote to remove Jonathan Sterling as chairman and CEO is unanimous. Even the members who owe their positions to him, who have profited from his leadership, who defended him through the investigation, even they understand that association has become liability. Loyalty extends only as far as reputation allows. His resignation letter is 3 sentences long, stripped of the eloquence he once wielded like a weapon. The press release from the board is longer, carefully worded to suggest they were unaware, that oversight will be strengthened, that the company will cooperate fully with authorities. The machinery of institutional survival clicking into place, protecting itself by sacrificing the person who can no longer be protected. Within a week, the Meadowbrook Community Center receives a check for $2.3 million, full restitution for stolen funds plus damages, plus interest, plus penalties. The director, Maria Santos, who has kept programs running on hope and determination for 3 years of dwindling resources, sits in her small office staring at the number until tears blur the zeros. She calls grandmother Evelyn that evening. We can expand. 3 times as many children. After-school programs. Technology center. Reading specialists. Everything we dreamed of and more. There's joy in her voice, and grief too. Joy for what's now possible. Grief for the years of struggle that shouldn't have been necessary, for the children who aged out of programs that closed, for opportunities lost while money that should have helped them line pockets already overflowing. The Sterling Foundation undergoes restructuring under federal oversight. New board. Independent auditors. Transparent reporting requirements. And an unexpected invitation. Would Amara Johnson be willing to serve as a consultant, helping ensure that funding distribution actually serves the communities it claims to serve? Grandmother Evelyn discusses it with her granddaughter at their kitchen table, the same table where Patricia Chen taught her how to prepare for testimony, where federal prosecutors reviewed evidence, where so many adult decisions have been made about a child's life. You don't have to, Evelyn says. You've done more than enough. I'd like to, Amara responds, thoughtful. Not forever. But maybe until they understand how to check their own work. How to see if money goes where it's supposed to. She accepts, with conditions, limited meetings, age-appropriate involvement, no media access. The foundation agrees. Within a month, her insights, simple questions like how do you verify the funds actually arrived, and who checks the checkers, reshape their accountability structures in ways that decades of corporate governance somehow missed. Media requests flood in with the inevitability of attention seeking the next story. Morning talk shows offering appearances. Documentary filmmakers proposing multi-part series. Publishers wanting book deals. Magazine profiles. Podcast interviews. A production company pitching a movie about the little girl who took down a billionaire. Grandmother Evelyn declines every single one. Her responses vary in wording but carry the same message. My granddaughter is 7 years old. She's a child, not a trophy. She did what was right. That shouldn't make her famous. It should make the adults who didn't do it ashamed. One documentary crew shows up at their apartment unannounced, cameras ready, release forms prepared. Evelyn meets them in the hallway, refuses to let them pass the door, and delivers a statement that will itself go viral when someone in the building records it and shares it online. Her story isn't entertainment, Evelyn says, voice quiet but carrying the weight of someone who has protected this child through forces that would have destroyed her. She exposed theft. She testified honestly. She helped children get resources they deserved. That's not a fairy tale for your cameras. That's a failure of every adult system that should have caught this years before a 7-year-old had to. The crew leaves. The video spreads. And in strange reversal, Evelyn's refusal to let her granddaughter be commodified becomes more famous than agreeing to interviews would have been. Amara returns to the Meadowbrook Community Center on a Saturday afternoon, not as a consultant or symbol but as herself, a kid who likes reading, who helps younger children sound out words, who sits in her favorite corner with whatever book she's currently borrowed. The center has new computers now, new books, new programs starting next month. Children she's known since she was 4 run around with energy that comes from safety and hope. A shy girl approaches, maybe 5 years old, clutching a picture book uncertainly. Can you help me read this? Amara smiles, pats the cushion beside her. Of course. What's it about? They read together, Amara's finger following the words, the younger girl sounding them out with increasing confidence. This is what the money was supposed to provide all along. Not complex corporate structures or administrative overhead, but this. A child learning. A community supported. Simple and crucial and almost stolen. The phone call comes 3 weeks after sentencing, when Sterling has been released on bail pending appeal, when his empire has been liquidated to pay restitution and fines, when his name has become cautionary tale rather than aspirational goal. Grandmother Evelyn almost doesn't answer the unfamiliar number. But something, intuition, perhaps, or curiosity, makes her pick up. Mrs. Johnson. The voice is Jonathan Sterling's, but stripped of everything that made it commanding. No arrogance. No smooth performance. Just exhaustion and something that might be honesty. I'm calling to apologize. Not through lawyers. Not for cameras. Just to apologize. Evelyn says nothing, waiting. I didn't see you as real, Sterling continues, his voice breaking slightly. You or your granddaughter or any of the children those programs served. You were numbers on reports. Tax benefits. Good publicity. I convinced myself the overhead was justified, that my comfort was earned, that taking a percentage wasn't really theft if the rest still went where it was supposed to. He pauses. Evelyn can hear him breathing, struggling. But Amara saw me. Really saw me. What I was doing. Who I'd chosen to become. And I couldn't hide behind complexity anymore because she made it simple. I was stealing from children. That's what let me do it. Not seeing you as real. And I'm sorry. The silence stretches. Evelyn considers forgiveness, that word people expect in moments like this, the resolution that would make this story end cleanly. But some things can't be undone with apologies. Some harm runs too deep for words to heal. Maybe you're finally seeing clearly, she says, and there's no warmth in her voice, but no cruelty either. Just honesty. I hope that clarity stays with you. I hope it hurts. Because that pain is how you know you're actually seeing. She hangs up without waiting for his response. Patricia Chen's final article publishes that Sunday, how a 7-year-old held power accountable, lessons in institutional courage. It's not about Amara specifically, but about the systemic failures her exposure revealed. Boards that didn't question, auditors who didn't audit, regulators who didn't regulate, adults who didn't see. The article concludes, change didn't come because the system worked. It came because the system failed so completely that a child could see what professionals missed or ignored. That's not a story about genius. It's a story about how we've normalized corruption by making it complex enough to deny. Within days, other nonprofits begin auditing their funding sources. Whistleblowers come forward in other sectors, education, healthcare, housing, emboldened by seeing that speaking truth can survive institutional pressure. The changes are small, incomplete, imperfect. But they're changes. And in a modest apartment where rent is paid on time this month and next, Amara Johnson finishes her homework, helps with dinner, reads before bed. 7 years old. Still herself. Changed by what she's carried but not broken by it. Outside, the city continues. Imperfect. Unequal. Capable of both cruelty and change. But somewhere in its chaos, accountability has taken root. Not revolution. Just the quiet insistence that truth matters more than comfort, that children deserve what's promised them, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing to power is someone small enough to slip past its defenses and see clearly what it's built on. 6 months pass the way time does when the world stops watching, steadily, quietly, returning life to rhythms that existed before cameras and headlines turned ordinary days into history. The media has moved on to newer stories, newer scandals, the next cycle of outrage and attention. Jonathan Sterling's trial is scheduled for fall, his name appearing in business sections rather than front pages now, reduced from empire to cautionary tale. The restructured Sterling Foundation holds its first quarterly meeting under independent oversight, implementing accountability measures that should have existed from the beginning. And Amara Johnson returns to being 7. She wakes up on Saturday morning to sunlight filtering through curtains that grandmother Evelyn hung when they moved into this apartment years ago. She eats cereal at the kitchen table, does her weekend homework with the careful precision she brings to everything, helps fold laundry that smells like the lavender detergent Evelyn buys on sale. Ordinary tasks that feel extraordinary in their normalcy, in being allowed to be a child whose biggest decision is which library book to check out next. The Meadowbrook Community Center has transformed in the months since restitution arrived. The reading room has tripled in size, new shelves installed and filled with books that still have that crisp unread smell. Computers line one wall, their screens glowing with possibility. The after-school program runs 5 days a week now instead of 2, staffed by teachers who can finally be paid what they're worth. The building itself has been renovated, fresh paint covering years of deferred maintenance, new carpet replacing worn linoleum, windows that actually seal against winter cold. But Amara's favorite corner remains unchanged by design. The same cushioned window seat where she's been reading since she was 4, the afternoon light falling at the same angle, the view of the street outside framing the neighborhood she knows by heart. She comes here every Saturday, checks out 3 books, returns the previous week's selections, and settles into her spot like coming home. Today she's working through a collection of myths from different cultures, Greek, Norse, West African, Japanese, drawn to the way stories travel across time and distance, carrying truth wrapped in metaphor. Around her, the center hums with Saturday afternoon energy. Children at computers researching school projects. Teenagers studying for exams in the new tutoring area. Parents attending the financial literacy workshop that started last month. The space is alive in ways it couldn't be when funding meant choosing between programs instead of expanding them. A small girl approaches Amara's corner, maybe 6 years old, wearing a dress that's been carefully mended at the hem. She's clutching a worn picture book, The Very Hungry Caterpillar, its cover soft from repeated reading. She stops a few feet away, uncertain, wanting something but not sure how to ask. Amara looks up from her myths, recognizes the hesitation. She's seen it before in mirrors, in moments when she wasn't sure if she belonged in spaces that seemed too big, too bright, too certain of their own rules. "Hi," Amara says, smiling. "I'm Amara. What's your name?" "Destiny," the girl whispers, so quietly it's almost lost in the ambient noise. "That's a beautiful name. What do you like to read?" Destiny looks down at her book, fingers tracing its familiar cover. "I don't know if I'm smart enough for the other books. My teacher says I'm behind." The words land with weight Amara understands too well. That early assessment of worth, that measurement of intelligence against arbitrary standards, that voice suggesting some children deserve books while others should accept their limitations. Amara sets her mythology collection aside, pats the cushion beside her. Destiny climbs up carefully, settling into the window seat with the reverence of someone being offered something precious. Being smart isn't about what people expect from you, Amara says, her voice gentle but firm, carrying wisdom earned too young through experiences she wouldn't wish on anyone. It's about what you discover when you pay attention. When you're curious about things. When you ask questions, even if adults think those questions are too simple or too complicated. Destiny looks at her, really looks, seeing something in Amara that makes her sit a little straighter. You can read any book you want, Amara continues. Start with ones that make you happy. Then try ones that make you curious. Then try ones that seem hard. And if someone says you're not smart enough, remember that they're measuring the wrong things. They're measuring what you already know, not what you're capable of learning. They spend the next hour reading together, first The Very Hungry Caterpillar, then a slightly more advanced book Amara recommends, then another. Destiny sounds out words with increasing confidence, stumbling sometimes but trying again, discovering that struggling isn't failing. It's just the work of learning. When Destiny's mother calls that it's time to leave, the girl clutches 2 new books to check out, her face bright with possibility that wasn't there an hour ago. Thank you, she whispers to Amara. Come back next week, Amara says. I'll be here. That evening, after dinner and dishes and the quiet rituals of Saturday night, Grandmother Evelyn sits with Amara on their worn couch. The television is off. The city noise filters through windows that still don't quite seal properly, but somehow the sound feels different now, less oppressive, more like accompaniment to their life continuing. Do you regret it? Evelyn asks quietly. Any of it? The exposure, the pressure, losing privacy? Being turned into something you never asked to become? Amara thinks about the question with the same careful consideration she brings to everything. Not rushing to answer, not offering what she thinks her grandmother wants to hear, just examining truth from different angles until its shape becomes clear. I wish I didn't have to, she finally says. I wish adults had seen what I saw before I saw it. I wish someone whose job it was to check for theft had actually checked. I wish I could have just been 7, reading books, helping younger kids, not testifying in federal court or explaining fraud to people who should have understood it better than me. She pauses, watching light from passing cars paint shadows across their ceiling. But I'm glad I did. Because those programs got funded. Because other places are checking their numbers now. Because maybe the next time someone tries to steal from kids, someone will stop them sooner. And because... She trails off, searching for words adequate to what she means, because I learned something about myself. That I can see truth and say it, even when people with power want me to be quiet. Evelyn pulls her granddaughter close, this child who carried weight that would have broken many adults, who testified with clarity that shamed professionals, who held integrity when institutions offered every reason to compromise. She's proud and heartbroken simultaneously, proud of who Amara is, heartbroken that she had to become it so young. You're going to change the world, Evelyn whispers. I don't want to change the world, Amara says, pragmatic as always. I just want it to work the way it's supposed to. The way it promises to work. Where money for children actually reaches children. Where truth matters more than power. Where being small doesn't mean you can be ignored. She returns to her mythology book, Finding Her Place, continuing the story she was in the middle of. Outside their window, the city continues its Saturday evening, imperfect, unequal, capable of both profound cruelty and surprising change. Somewhere across town, Jonathan Sterling sits in a penthouse he can no longer afford, awaiting trial that will determine his future. Somewhere, corporate boards meet in emergency sessions, scrutinizing practices they previously accepted without question. Somewhere, a whistleblower gathers courage, remembering that a 7-year-old refused to stay silent. And at the Meadowbrook Community Center, locked now for the evening but waiting for Monday, Renovated spaces hold new books and computers and possibilities. Children will arrive after school, do homework with tutors who can finally be paid properly, learn in programs that exist because theft was exposed and stopped. Not because the system worked. Because the system failed so completely that a child could see what professionals missed or ignored. Inside their small apartment, Amara turns a page. The quiet act of reading that started everything, that gave her the tools to recognize patterns in documents, that taught her words could carry meaning adults tried to hide. She's reading about Anansi the spider now, trickster figure from West African folklore who uses cleverness to challenge those with power. The stories are thousands of years old, but their message remains constant. Size doesn't determine strength, and intelligence doesn't require permission. Grandmother Evelyn watches her granddaughter read, sees the child she was and the person she's becoming, all the ways this experience has marked her, all the ways she's remained herself despite pressure to become symbol or victim or prodigy. She's just Amara. 7 years old. Brilliant and ordinary. Changed and unchanged. The news plays quietly on Evelyn's phone. Sterling's trial date confirmed. Foundation restructuring complete. Other cases of non-profit fraud being investigated in 3 states. Small victories. Incomplete justice. But justice nonetheless, spreading like ripples from a stone thrown into water, changing the surface in ways that seem minor until you measure how far they travel. Amara finishes her chapter, marks her place, sets the book aside carefully. She yawns, ready for bed, for sleep, for the ordinary rhythm of a child's life. Tomorrow is Sunday. They'll go to church, visit Evelyn's sister for dinner, maybe stop by the library for a new book if she finishes her current stack. Normal. Precious. Hard one. As Evelyn tucks her granddaughter into bed, Amara asks the question she asks most nights now, "Do you think it's really over?" "I think," Evelyn says carefully, honest as always, "that you did what you needed to do. The rest is for other people to carry now. You held them accountable. What they do with that accountability isn't your burden anymore." Amara nods, satisfied with this truth. She closes her eyes, and within minutes her breathing evens into sleep. Evelyn stands in the doorway, watching this child who exposed an empire while clutching a library book, who testified with dignity that shamed adults, who changed systems while trying only to help children get what they'd been promised. The world wanted to make her exceptional. But her exceptionalism was simply refusing to accept that theft becomes acceptable when it's complicated enough. Change didn't arrive with thunder. It didn't announce itself with fanfare or revolution. It arrived when a child in a red shirt, holding a worn library book like armor, refused to look away from what she saw. When she declined to pretend that complexity excused theft, that power justified silence, that being 7 meant her clarity didn't matter. The story could end here, with the child asleep and justice imperfectly served and a community center restored. But stories don't really end. They just find their pause points, their breath before the next chapter. Somewhere, another child will face injustice. Somewhere, power will assume silence. Somewhere, complexity will be weaponized to obscure truth. And somewhere, someone small and underestimated will refuse to look away. Will read documents others miss. Will speak truth others fear. Will prove that integrity spoken quietly can dismantle empires built on assumption that it wouldn't dare make noise. Amara Johnson, 7 years old, sleeps peacefully. And tomorrow, she'll wake up and be exactly who she is, a child who likes reading, who helps younger kids with homework, who carries wisdom she shouldn't have needed to earn but wields it with grace anyway. The world continues turning. Imperfect. Changed. Accountable in ways it wasn't before a child decided that numbers don't lie, and neither would she. If you loved this captivating story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. And make sure you turn on the notification bell, so you never miss another powerful story like this one when it drops. Thank you for watching and see you in my next story. Enjoy the rest of your day.